Welcome to Cycling Demystified, brought to you by Foundation Bike Fit and Frequency Cycle Works, the podcast where we help you take your cycling to the next level by sharing the knowledge from experienced bike fitters, mechanics, and the hidden players within the bike industry.
Alright everyone, welcome back to the Cycling Demystified podcast with me, Way, and
Grumpy old Matt.
Grumpy Old Matt.
But we're on tour today.
On tour?
Cycling Demystified on tour.
Ah, where are we?
We are hiding in a corner of the Royal Festival Hall.
Ah, a good place to be though, you know. Upmarket.
We moved up in the world.
Moved up in the world, yeah. And what are we going to talk about today?
We're going to talk about Paris Roubaix.
Yeah, it is the week after Paris Roubaix.
The dust has settled.
It has indeed. But instead of doing like analysis of the race, and that's all been covered, so we thought we'd give a bike fitter's perspective. Bike fitters. What's the plural of bike fitters? Bike fitters. Bike fitters.
That is, yeah,
Plural,
a bike fitter's
possessive.
perspective. Yeah.
Perspective on the challenges that Roubaix brings about to our bike riding. Why we love it. It's my favourite race of the year, certainly as a spectacle, not to ride. Well, once you've done it, maybe once is enough. Some people go back multiple times. But yeah, thought we'd give some perspective on that. And see what useful things we can come out. Would you change your bike position if you had to ride Paris Roubaix? Matt, I will ask you that.
Would I?
Yeah.
Put me on the spot here.
Yeah. But we'll get around to that. We'll listen to that.
Give me a minute, I'll have a think.
Yeah. But also, if we spotted anything at this year's race, which was notable about bike changes, because Paris Roubaix traditionally, certainly since I've been watching it, since the early 2000s, has always been a race which has brought about some wacky bikes, some interesting, air quotes, innovation. And somewhere where we've seen some experimental bits of equipment or bikes. And I guess it's a challenge which has got people thinking differently about their bike riding, which is why some of it is pretty exciting. I enjoyed the challenge of that. But modern bikes, if we look at 2025, everyone's pretty much riding the same bike, I would say. So maybe this was where we were thinking about this week's episode, talking about how or have bikes changed? Have we reached peak Roubaix? Have manufacturers solved Roubaix? Don't know. What do you reckon?
You could argue for and against, really, couldn't you?
For and against?
I mean, if you look back at the history of the race, before, let's say, the 90s.
I'm not that old.
Well, but you know what I mean? No, neither am I,
Yeah.
but if you look back at the bikes people were like Sean Kelly were riding
Yeah.
back in the day,
Steel
Steel,
lugs.
19 mil tubs.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Riding on drops.
Yeah.
19 mil tubs.
But everyone was riding the same bike, right? More or less.
Pretty much, yeah.
There wasn't anything sort of wild or wacky about the setups that were wildly different from what everyone else was riding. Because
I guess that was true of like the whole peloton, really.
Yeah,
back
exactly.
in the area of the lug steel race bike.
Yeah.
And,
Everyone was riding basically the same thing.
yeah.
Lugged, steel, 19 mil tubs.
We're probably doing someone a massive disservice.
Yeah, probably. But we're talking massive generalities. Seven-speed Campag.
Yeah.
And that was basically that. And then the 90s came around and then we started to see some wild and wacky stuff, specifically for Roubaix.
Yeah.
Or the Cobble Classics.
Yeah. I'm thinking of like Johan Museeu's Bianchi with
yeah.
full suspension.
Bianchi with a RockShox fork.
Yeah. Who's the other one? Jack Bauer. Not Jack Bauer.
No.
Steve Bauer.
Steve Bauer.
Jack would
Not
be watching too much 24.
Exactly, yeah.
Steve Bauer and his Eddie Merckx, which he had a 67-degree seat tube,
Very slack seat tube.
which is quite funny.
Yeah.
But all kinds of things.
Well, then you
in
come back
between.
later and then remember the Pinarello, the K8,
Yeah.
which
Geraint.
was sort of Team Sky kind of era with, I think, how much travel?
Suspension.
20 mil of travel at the back?
Oh, I don't know.
A little elastomer kind of
Yeah,
vibe,
boingy thing.
boingy thing
in the
that
in
never
the top of
caught
the
on.
seats Well, Trek had one before that. George Hincapie was riding a Trek with an elastomer.
Yeah, that's true.
And then it was into the era of Cancellara and his Domane with the ISO speed.
That for me was like peak Roubaix. Those years when Cancellara was destroying Flanders and Roubaix, like, yeah, that for me was peak Roubaix.
Yeah, not going to talk about motors or anything.
No. But then Tom Bonan with his Zerts.
Yeah.
And other pharmaceutically assisted
only recreational
methods. Recreational, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then now everything's kind of settled down again, and everyone's riding the same sort of stuff.
Yeah, I don't know. Like everyone's settled onto aero, is back again. Integrated handlebars.
Narrow integrated handlebars.
Deep section rims.
Yeah.
I remember when Hincapie rode Roubaix and he was riding some Bontrager Aeolus deep section wheels, and everyone's like, "What are you doing?" Everyone's still on box section rims with 32 spokes or 36 spokes or whatever.
Yeah.
He was out there on his Aeoluses and they absolutely folded it off.
Yeah. Only did it once, didn't he?
Yeah, but now, has technology got to the point where, wheel manufacturing is so good that, you can ride a 50, 60 mil deep aero wheel and it's absolutely fine.
Well, we assume it's fine. We don't know what they do with these bikes after the race.
Well, yeah, that's another interesting point. I mean,
because there was, I don't know if you saw this, there was a junior that rode Roubaix this year. I think he had a Ridley, something or other, and basically caved in his bike. Like his bike broke, it snapped.
Yeah.
Just from the pounding of the gobbles.
Yeah.
So we don't know what goes on with these wheels, with these frames after Roubaix.
Yeah, I guess that's another. Maybe we can get onto that kind of section. So, I guess I'm interested in talking about how teams and manufacturers and pro riders get around the challenge of Roubaix.
The Roubaix problem.
But then, as an amateur, then it's a completely different kind of challenging equation altogether. And then, I think we should talk about positional stuff. Since we're bike fitters, then we should talk about the positional stuff. So there's two distinct halves of this conversation. I think we should go
the equipment and the position,
and how those relate.
Okay.
So, but yeah, I think it seems like, well, I think the narrowest tyre anyone was riding this year was a 32 mil road tyre, but the biggest tyre was also only a 35. So is there that much difference between like a 35 to a 32? And is there that much difference between a 32 and a 28? I guess that was the biggest that anyone was riding prior to the last few years.
Well, I guess the conundrum has always been tyre width, or tyre size or volume with Roubaix, right?
Yeah.
So if you think about going back a few years, everyone was riding the widest tyres that they could fit in the frame, which were generally 28s, possibly 30s.
Yeah.
So I remember back in the old, the Garmin Barracuda days or the CSE days or whatever, like Cervelo did a brand of bike called the R3 Mud, which just had slightly wider, you could get a slightly wider tyre in there, but it was only like a 28.
Yeah.
But that
Victoria Pavé,
Victoria Pavé,
the green stripe.
with the green stripe,
What a tyre.
Or, Challenge Stradas or whatever. Tubulars. But basically, the widest tyre you get was a 28. And that was kind of always, in my mind, the limiting factor of Roubaix was the tyre clearance. And I think, hot take, but this is why we saw all the janky stuff with suspension, because the tyre clearance was a bit limited.
Yeah.
And if you think going from a 28 to a 32 or a 35, doesn't sound like a lot, but that additional volume of air, coupled with the fact that it's all now tubeless, so you can run a lower pressure anyway, kind of seems like it's hit the sweet spot and solved that kind of issue.
Yeah.
So, Poggy's bike, for instance, can take a 40, but it can. But is that too much? And that's the thing, is it's 32 to 35 the sweet spot, where you get just enough compliance through the kind of the pneumatic effect of the tyre, but you can also run the pressures high enough whereby on the road you're not slowed down as much, because everyone forgets that Roubaix, the vast majority of it is smooth tarmac.
Yeah, it's a 200k race.
It's a 260k race with, I'd say, probably less than 20% of that.
It's cobbles.
It's cobbles.
Yeah.
So it's still a road race.
Yeah.
And you kind of, if you're looking at optimizing your bike setup as a pro team, you've kind of got to look at the biggest element of the race, which is smooth tarmac.
Yeah.
And you don't want to get left behind on the largest portion of the race.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the Roubaix it's just getting faster and faster and faster each year.
You can't win it on the tarmac, but you can certainly lose it.
Yeah.
So maybe we've hit the sweet spot of 32 to 35, whereby the pressures are low enough to deal with the cobbles, but high enough and they roll fast enough to be acceptable for the smooth tarmac.
Yeah.
That's my take on it.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. I just can't believe that this is peak bike, as it were.
Well, it pains us because you can't adjust them, I think. Yeah, we say peak bike and we say that tongue in cheek because it's absolutely not peak bike. We've regressed in many ways.
Yeah.
But in terms of out and out speed for professionals, yeah, this is peak bike.
Yeah. Because there is one thing, we used to see cross bikes quite often in Roubaix.
Well, I remember Wout van Aert rode an Aspero one year.
Did he?
Yeah, he rode a gravel bike.
Ah, I was about to say, like this year he rode a soloist.
Soloist.
Yeah. But none of the Visma team were riding Asperos, were they?
No.
They were all on their S5s.
Because it's
aero
the tyre clearance conundrum, right? So, whereas, Pauline Ferrand-Prévot, who won the women's race, was riding an S5.
Yeah.
So it obviously works.
Yeah.
And you can get probably squeeze a 30 in the S5, I think.
Yeah, I think they're riding 32s.
Yeah.
On the S5s.
Maybe wafer thin clearance with that.
Yeah, and that's the thing though. Like the cross bikes were used as bikes which had much bigger mud clearance because maximum tyre clearance for a cross bike is 33 mil, UCI reasons, but there'll be bags of room for like mud clearance usually. And when was the last time we had a muddy Roubaix?
2021?
2021?
2022?
Sonny
It was
Colbrelli.
the year Sonny Colbrelli won.
Yeah, covered in mud.
Yeah.
Head to toe. It's quite an image. I go look it up.
But we haven't had a disgustingly wet Roubaix for a few years.
Yeah, it's been dry and dusty and fast, and that's where I wonder, Van der Poel riding his air road, if it was a muddy Roubaix, would he make any changes? Would there be enough mud clearance within that air road with a 32 mil tyre in there?
Would it matter?
Would it matter?
I mean, for someone like a Van der Poel who has ridiculous cross skills, would it matter?
Well, it would do if his bike jams up. I mean, that mud's got to go somewhere.
True.
But is it just, is it the combination of, bikes getting better, but the course being drier and dustier, and everyone's just getting faster and faster. I mean, none of this would be possible without the advent of disc brakes.
Yeah.
And
tubeless is getting a lot better, a lot more consistent. There's a lot more tyre options for tubeless now than there was even 3-4 years ago.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know how many people were riding tubeless versus tubular.
Yeah.
I don't know, does anyone ride tubular anymore?
I think they do. I don't know
because
for a fact who, but I think there are some teams that still ride tubs.
If I was riding Roubaix,
I'd want tubs.
I'd run tubs.
Yeah.
I want my tyre to stay on my rim at all costs. None of this blowing off the rims and stuff like that. But, I don't know, but I do feel like, maybe the bike, just the tyre clearance and the width and the way that we're holding air within the tyre is enough that it makes the bike comfortable enough that you can ride it in a more aggressive position, a more standard road bike position. Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know. I still feel like we could see. I feel like someone's got to come up with a bit more innovation in the Roubaix specific bike.
But innovation is driven by necessity, isn't it?
Yeah.
And as long as it stays dry, the aero bikes are always going to be, they're always going to come out on top.
Or Aero's always comes out top trumps, haven't they?
When you go in that fast,
Yeah.
for amateurs it's a different story.
Yeah.
But when you go in that fast, I mean, what was the average speed for Roubaix here? It was like 45 k's an hour?
Something
Something
ridiculous.
absolutely insane.
Yeah.
But when you go in that fast, aerodynamics is a thing.
Yeah.
When you go in at the speed I ride, it doesn't matter. Or it matters a hell of a lot less. Let's say that. So yeah, maybe the Roubaix equation has been solved for now.
For the pros.
For the pros in dry conditions.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to see what happens when we do get a
wet one.
wet Roubaix.
Yeah.
Just to see what changes, if anything.
Because as you were saying earlier, there are choices in that. Yeah, you could use a gravel bike. And
Well, you look at Van der Poel and when the bike he won Gravel Worlds.
Yeah.
I say Gravel Worlds loosely. The UCI Gravel
Yeah.
Worlds. He's basically riding a gravel bike. I can't remember which. I think it was can you call it a Grizzle?
Grizzle,
or something.
yeah.
But it's basically a road bike with fat tyres.
Yeah.
Like, it was his road position, definitely his road position.
Yeah.
Because he looked just as janky on that as he does on his air ride. But it was literally just a road bike with even bigger tyres.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we'll see. But I don't think for the pros it changes things that much. Might just slow them down a little bit. Who knows? But we'll see.
Yeah, because we were talking earlier about how all the Roubaix specific bikes that were built, including the specialised Roubaix, which gives its name or gets its name from the race, was always designed specifically as the bike to conquer Roubaix. And initially it had elastomers or zerts inserts
in the seat stays and in the fork.
And the current edition has front suspension underneath the stem and a zerts. Is it still called zerts?
There's a seat post as well.
Seat post? It is still called zerts.
I think so.
Yeah.
I try not to look at that bike if I can help it.
And by all accounts, it's a great bike, but no one buys it. Like, everyone wants the tarmac because that's what all the pros ride, and no one wants a boingy bit of suspension.
Well, then they have why would you buy a Roubaix when you can buy a Diverge, which is far more capable, does a similar sort of thing, and then you've got a tarmac. So the Roubaix, that kind of era of bike kind of doesn't, or that sort of style of bike doesn't really serve that much of a purpose anymore.
It's an obsolete bike. It's like, because would you ride the Roubaix?
Not talking about geometry, right, because it very much has a place in its frame shape and the type of kind of people it fits. So fit aside, it doesn't serve a purpose.
Yeah.
Because it's not there's better, faster, whatever you want to call it, more aero bikes for the road.
Yeah.
And there's more capable bikes for off-road. So why would you buy the bike that doesn't do either as well as the other one?
Yeah, I guess the only reason you would go for the Roubaix was because of the suspension, and you believed in the comfort of the suspension. Maybe you got, susceptible hands to numbness or something like that.
I mean, the only reason outside of fit parameters would be, like I say.
And then, but the Domane, that's still going strong.
Though
they've dialed that back down.
Well, the Domane's changed a lot, right? So, and this is what I take umbrage with. So, the Domane you buy now versus the Domane that Cancellara rode, completely different bikes. Like the Cancellara Domane, circa 2016, 2015, maybe. Maybe a bit before. It was 2013. Can't remember. Time passes so quick. But yeah, that kind of Domane with H1 geometry. Peak Domane, right?
It still had the ISO-speed in it, in the rear end.
Yeah, but only in the rear end.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the geometry was much more race bike than it is now. Which, and again, fit aside, the Domani's, we love the Domani because it fits a lot of people really well. Yeah. But it's kind of been maybe sort of dialed down a little bit. Like,
yeah, it's become synonymous with their endurance range, inverted commas. So, yeah, the geometry is much taller and shorter, a bit slacker. The suspension is there to introduce more comfort. They had, for a while, front and rear suspension, ISO speeds. I think that's been dialed back down
it's just
now, so it's just the rear now.
But if I remember rightly, the older Domani, the Cancellara Domani, had a round seat post rather than this stupid proprietary thing that Trek insist on. And the ISO speed was a lot more robust. Yeah. So didn't have all these problems with like bushings going and all this stuff that happens on the more modern ones. We had a round seat post, so you had a bit more choice. Yeah. So like, has it gone too far? Maybe. I don't know. I feel like a selling point of the Domani is that it is tech heavy. Yeah. It's got all these tech features like ISO speed. I mean, it was basically a bit of suspension in a form of elastomer, moving around a bit. But an upside. They used to, on the Gen 3, they had like an upside down seat post mast. Yeah. I don't know why that was never
necessary.
With the right length.
Yeah, and it just made everything more complicated. Yeah. Integrated kind of cabling now, which kind of adds to the complexity of it all. The proprietary stems and so on and blah 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 blah. Anyway. So it's a different bike, but it somehow that's had more of a place in kind of everyday riding compared with the Roubaix, I reckon.
Well, I think the Roubaix, because of its name, is synonymous with one day of the year. Yeah. Whereas the Domani, you can change the way you market that bike. Yeah. Depending on how you want to place it.
Yeah. Do people go and buy the Specialized Roubaix because they know about Paris Roubaix? I don't know if people.
Well, no one bought the Fuji Roubaix, did they?
No. That's true.
So.
Yeah.
I don't know.
How did Fuji get away with that? Because Specialized were pretty,
Well, weren't Fuji? They did it first.
They did it first. Yeah.
Because then Specialized sued them and took them to court or something for breach of
contract.
Well, I don't know what it was, but they basically were like, "Nah, we are the Big S. We are going to call this bike the Roubaix.
I mean, I'm sure
you need to change your name." And there was that little cafe, wasn't there, as well? So it's the Big S flexing their corporate muscle. But I don't know. Like maybe people don't buy the Roubaix because of how successful the tarmac is, and that's fine. Or maybe they don't buy it because they don't want a bike that's just supposed to be ridden on cobbles. I say that in air quotes.
Yeah, because Lisa Longo-Borghini, Lizzie Deignan won Roubaix on a Domani.
Yeah.
So
a modern Domani.
A modern Domani.
Not a Cancellara edition one.
Yeah. So that it's obviously a race-worthy bike. But maybe it just comes down to labels. Like we've certainly sold Domanis to people who wanted to race on them and then got told when they went to a bike shop that the bike shop wouldn't sell it to them because it wasn't a air quotes race bike.
You need a tarmac.
Yeah. So maybe there is more in just a name and concept than there is. So is there space in the modern day for a Roubaix specific bike?
For the pros, probably not.
Really?
Yeah.
I thought, I mean, I guess that's the other thing. There are UCI rules around you have to race a bike which is available to buy. I mean, there's ways around it, but maybe they're good enough, the bikes, that they don't have to make a Roubaix specific bike. But I think that's sad. Part of the appeal of the race was, the chance to bring out something wacky and try something else and do something different. Even if it was just, double wrapping your bar tape or, hiding your blip somewhere, or I don't know.
Sprint shifters.
Yeah, I mean, there's still a little like kind of odes to that,
Yeah.
taping your bars all the way in and putting elastic bands around your water bottles so they don't ping out.
But you certainly don't get the interesting stuff. I mean, I think the most interesting bit of tech that we saw from the classics this year was Trek running the transmission
Oh, and drilling
and
out.
drilling out the rear derailleur, so you only had 12 shifts rather than 13.
Yeah,
I think that was probably the most innovative / interesting bit.
that rear derailleur is ridiculous.
It's
though.
so
We just had a look at one in the
unnecessary.
workshop, didn't we?
Yeah.
It's so
It's the new, so it's the new Red Explore transmission with the UDH hanger. It's 30. Well, it's designed 1x13,
Yeah.
and it is ridiculous. Borderline unnecessary.
Yeah.
Definitely ridiculous.
Yeah.
But I think that was probably the most interesting bit of Roubaix-esque tech.
But maybe that's it as well. Like one by systems have become de rigueur, they're accepted, and so you can run 54, 56 tooth chain rings, hold the chain on more easily, get an aero ring on there.
Yeah.
It's probably good. So yeah, we shall see. I maybe we have reached peak bike, but I hold out hope for someone to come along and make a Roubaix specific bike and see if they can make it work. I'd love to see some more wacky innovations. I don't know. Why hasn't anyone ridden like a Lao Fork or something like that?
I mean, you've ridden a Lao Fork.
Yeah,
You can answer your own question.
Rhetorical
there.
question, maybe.
You can answer your own question. But I think we're seeing like what happened in Roubaix like 25, 30 years ago is now happening in gravel.
Yeah.
Like
Maybe
all
in
the
dropper posts.
janky saddles, or janky setups that are going on in like gravel.
Yeah.
Like maybe that's the new
Yeah.
frontier for
I
janky
mean,
bike tech.
gravel suspension is here. Fox and RockShox are all making gravel specific suspension.
But it's a similar kind of thing, isn't it? Now everyone's going 2.2 mountain bike tyres in gravel, running super narrow bars, ridiculously long road like stems, like almost quasi road positions, but just with mega tyres. The gearing's getting bigger and bigger,
Yeah.
so it all seems to be like converging.
Yeah. Oh well. Let's talk about amateurs then. Like, so what does this mean for like the amateur? Because Roubaix is such a specific race. It's specific for the pros. It's specific. Even the guys who race it, they train specifically for it. Usually, which is why Tadej Pogačar racing it was quite exciting this year. But as it has some unique qualities, as you were saying. It's a 260 kilometre road race with some cobbles in it. So you have to be able to race the road as well as the cobbles. And I guess you could trash your bike in that one day and it doesn't really matter.
Well, that was the whole thing, wasn't it? It was like when I worked in a bike shop and the people were going to do the Roubaix Sportive, they would buy a bike specifically to trash in Roubaix because they know it was going to take an absolute battering. And it was usually, like we're talking like 10 years ago now, but it was usually a Can 10 or something of that ilk, where it was kind of like aluminium, like you could sort of put wider tyres in it and it didn't really matter if it kind of rubbed the frame a little bit because it wasn't carbon. But it was usually metal, it was usually cheaper. Like 105 would be max. Like Ultegra would be like super bougie for a Roubaix bike.
Low profile rims. Minimum 32
spokes, and double wrap the bars.
Go.
And that was basically it.
And don't put anything in your pockets.
Exactly, because you won't have them when and gloves.
Gloves.
You had to have mitts because your hands are taking.
Well, that's interesting as well because. Like, do you ride with mitts?
Never.
Yeah, I don't ride with mitts. Like, I've definitely gone away from mitts, and I feel like I don't know any other bike fitters who ride with mitts. Maybe I'm just trying to see trends where they aren't. But
no, I don't think I think they're very of their time. And it's usually, like in my opinion, like padded mitts especially. Like I get like mitts if it's kind of like just a layer. It's like if you come a cropper and you put your hand down and you scrape your hand, it's not nice. So, but mitts with extra padding in to alleviate things like hand numbness in my opinion, the majority of the time, that is masking something positional. Yeah. Call me out if I'm wrong, but that's how I see it. But yeah, I don't think
because like
I know a
Dijkman,
lot of people that ride with mitts.
Lizzie Dijkman won the first women's Roubaix with no gloves on, and it, because her hands were bleeding at the end of it. So it's
Well, Poggy was wearing mitts
yeah,
this weekend.
Yeah.
And his £300,000 watch on that was cutting into him.
oh yeah, blood all over.
But yeah, it's back in the day, if you were an amateur riding Roubaix, you were investing in a set of padded mitts.
Yeah,
And an extra set of Barte,
Yeah.
Barte, 100%. But now,
I don't know. Would you take a Canyon Air Road to the Arenberg Trench?
mate, I would not take a Canyon Air Road full stop.
Yeah.
That would be going straight in the river.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of people that would,
Yeah.
rightly or wrongly, don't know.
I mean, if you do go and see Roubaix, that you see all kinds of bikes doing it. Like I remember doing Roubaix and Flanders, and there'd be, the local guys are out on their mountain bikes doing it.
I think I'd take a cross-country mountain bike.
Yeah. But you wouldn't be getting the authentic experience. Then.
No, I'd be able to walk the next day.
Yeah, I don't know. So I guess it depends what you want out of it.
And I think that's the kind of the thing. It's like when you, I don't know, you've spectated it, haven't you?
Yeah.
When you watch
people there to ride it. I was gluing on freaking tubs for someone the night before. It's disgusting.
But when you see the front of the race and they hit the cobbles, I don't think people quite appreciate the speed that they hit these things at. And it makes an absolute clattering when you go from the smooth tarmac onto the cobbles. It's like being hit by a truck. It's like the force is ridiculous. And I don't think people quite appreciate
that's why they changed
and the skill involved in controlling that.
Yeah. Well, that's why they changed the entrance to Arenberg Forest. It has that little dog
They've
leg
took
now.
the speed off it.
Yeah. Because it was.
Because it used to be a straight shot, right?
Yeah. It was like a dead straight road, just straight down. You go past this kind of mine shaft and kind of windmill thing, and the peloton was doing
They're hitting, I think, 50k.
50k an hour. Yeah. It has to be, and everyone wants to be at the front, and it's just horrendous. But yeah, as an amateur, ride what you want. But it just depends what you want. If you want the true Roubaix experience and want to ride what the pros ride, then you got to see. Yeah, but at the same time, you're not going to be riding at the same speed that they're riding, so it's just going to be different. It's just going to be more difficult.
Well, that's the thing. It's like the faster you hit this stuff, the more you'll skate over the top of it.
Yeah.
And the slower you hit this stuff, the more you're going to get bounced around, and the more likely your tyre is going to get caught between the cobbles.
I've never seen so much debris on a sporty, just down the Arenberg Trench, pumps, mini tools,
Chains,
bottles, chains,
left-hand crank arms.
Yeah, just stuff everywhere.
Sounds like my old canoe riding through Stockwell.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's hard on bikes and it's hard on bodies.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. You've ridden the Arenberg on a vastly inappropriate bicycle. If you were to do it again, what would you?
This is it. Maybe part of the fun is riding it on a completely inappropriate vehicle. It's not like cyclocross. Cyclocross is doing a race in a wholly inappropriate vehicle.
That's part of the fun.
Yeah. But at the same time, as an amateur, something like a Specialized Roubaix or Trek de Marne makes perfect sense. Just taking enough of the sting out that you can actually make it through. I don't know. I'd have to. I don't know. I don't think I would want to take my Colnago down there.
No.
I'm too precious about that kind of stuff. But I don't know. Maybe a steel bike.
Yeah.
Make a lot of sense.
Titanium.
Maybe. Yeah. But even those, I remember talking to a frame builder, so I had a steel bike made, and he was like, "Do not take it to Roubaix."
Yeah.
But yeah. Right, let's move on to bike positioning then. Since we talked all about the bike, and as bike fitters, if you listen to us, we're very much about bodies on bikes. we've had a bit of a deviation today because it's Roubaix. So we talked about the bike.
A lot
first.
about bikes.
But what about bodies on bikes? Would we change, if you had to ride Roubaix, Matt, would you change anything about your regular road bike position? Because essentially that's what Steve Bauer did with his crazy...
with his crazy Bianchi. His crazy
60,
seat tube.
seat tube, 67-degree seat tube. And by all accounts, he said, it was brilliant over the cobbles, but totally lost him the race when he was doing the road sections.
Yeah.
But, should we talk about the concept of that?
Yeah, I think, for context, I think, why did he do that?
Yeah.
What was the theory behind the idea?
Yeah.
Why did it work so well on the cobbles? Yeah. And why did it not work on the tarmac?
So, a 67-degree seat tube angle is a very slack seat tube angle. So this puts your, let's call it your bum, quite far behind your feet when you're sitting on the bike. So if you imagine the bottom bracket of the bike, where the centre of the bike is, where the crank arms attach, it's where your feet are going around. The slacker seat tube angle, the further behind that bottom bracket your body will be seated. And so that pushes your centre of gravity far back. If we're thinking about this from like a biomechanical perspective, then instead of pushing down on the pedals when you're generating force, you're almost kind of pushing the bike away a little bit. So you're kind of reaching out for the pedals. So biomechanically, probably not as efficient. But because your centre of gravity is so far back, that makes you very, very stable. So it's quite hard to throw yourself or get thrown off course. And so I guess some of the thinking behind a really slack seat tube angle is to maintain stability over the cobbles. Also to improve comfort, because you're just further away from the points of contact, and there's more bike between you and the cobbles from where you're sitting anyway. But because if you're as slack as Mr. Bauer, then because you're not biomechanically as efficient, then you lose a lot of that efficiency on the road and therefore a lot of speed, and you lose the race. So he didn't quite get the right balance between creating more comfort and balancing that with efficiency at the same time. I'd also say, I'd be, like if you think about mountain biking, it's kind of gone the opposite way around.
Yeah,
like
so I'll get onto this, but yeah, you go.
Yeah, so what's happened to mountain bikes, Matt?
Well, they're getting steeper and steeper.
The seat tube angle's gone the opposite way, isn't it?
So I think, what was it, the most aggro one that I can think of off the top of my head is like the Scott Spark.
Yeah.
Which is the Nino Schurter bike.
Yeah.
Which is 76 point something. With an inline post, which is insane.
It's like they flipped the numbers around.
Yeah, but that,
67 to 76. Yeah.
But then that does the opposite, pitches you very far, your weight very far forward relative to your feet, and more weight over the front of the bike, which has its merits in certain circumstances, and not so much in others. So there's probably a balance
to be had. Well, what's the difference between a mountain bike where you've got suspension at the front?
Well, the geometry of the bike basically changes as soon as you sit on it.
Yeah.
Especially a full suspension bike.
Yeah.
So that Scott bike that I just mentioned, as soon as you sit on that bike, it becomes slacker.
Because of the rear suspension.
Because of the rear suspension, and naturally the weight distribution changes depending on how much sag you run, all this kind of stuff. So mountain bike's a little bit different because the geometry is a bit more dynamic depending on how you set your suspension up. But Mr. Bauer's bike, static geometry, so he was slack all day. Yeah. And well, that's Roubaix it is pan flat.
Yeah, it's pan flat. So there's no up or down.
There's no up or down. So like you think about a downhill bike, like a World Cup downhill mountain bike. Again, you're hanging over the back of the bike because all of the terrain is falling away from you. Whereas on a cross-country mountain bike, a lot of it is coming up towards you. So it kind of necessitates different body weight positions relative to your feet, potentially. There's an argument that it doesn't, but generally speaking, certain things can help you and hinder you in different situations. So, but Roubaix being a flat race, a balance is probably, and this is where now we're kind of settling on road bikes being 73.5, 74 degrees. That's probably the happy medium between the two for the professional riders.
Yeah.
Not necessarily for amateurs, but for professional riders who are putting a truckload of power down.
Yeah.
They can maintain their pedaling efficiency because their weight is a little bit further forward relative to their feet. But the weight doesn't translate as much into their hands because they are putting a truckload of force through the bike.
Yeah, yeah.
Whereas for us amateurs, we might want to think about taking a little bit of a leaf out of Mr. Bauer's book, going a little bit further back so that we're not as battered when we hit the cobbles, but we don't lose as much efficiency for the other 230 odd K tarmac.
Yeah.
You know, so there's probably a balance to be had, I would say.
Because you look at like Pog's position and Van der Poel's position,
They
they
didn't
basically
change.
didn't
It's basically
change.
the same. Yeah. But they get away with it, I think, because of the amount of force that they can apply through the bike. And they're basically just levitating on top of it, and so much weight is going through their feet that they can almost get away with it a little bit.
I wonder if this is where Van der Poel excels a little bit, because he is a bit more built. He's got a lot more.
Mate, the guys like Duke Nukem, he's henge.
Yeah.
Like, he literally took a full 500-gram bottle to the face.
Yeah. Yeah.
And still won the race.
Oh, that's another thing, isn't it? Yeah. Getting a bottle in the face and then just carrying on.
But their positions they barely change because I think they're putting so much force out that they can just get away with it. And the bikes are so capable that they can handle the force and the shock of hitting those cobbles at like 45, 50k an hour.
Yeah.
And because of all the things that we talked about with the additional lower pressures through tubeless setups, through slightly wider tyre clearance, like a lot of these bikes now, they are super stiff, but they have built-in compliance in certain areas of the frame.
Yeah.
So I think like it's a combination of rider power that just amateurs just don't have, and also the bikes are so capable in dry conditions that they don't need to change anything.
Yeah, I think if I was an amateur, I'd probably ride something with like as big a tyre I could fit in there as possible. Like Cervelo Aspero would probably be.
Or a Cervelo Aspero or a Specialized Crux.
Yeah.
Something like the Crux maybe a bit more comfy because it's got slightly thinner stays. But positionally, what I would be thinking, I'd run my saddle height slightly lower.
Yeah.
Couple of like 3 or 4 mil lower, and I'd also have a borderline midfoot cleat position. So I'd go slightly lower, slightly further forward. Bring my feet forward on the pedals. So I've like basically the whole of my foot in contact with what I'm pushing against, just to try and get as much power out as possible from posterior chain. And I'd probably bring the bike a little bit towards me, just a touch, like 5-10 mil.
A smidge.
A suggestion. A very precise unit of bike fit measurement. And that would probably be it. And I'd just run the widest tyres I can fit in the frame, but I do that anyway. So.
Yeah, I think running your saddle a little bit lower just so you're a bit more in the bike would make sense.
I'll probably have a saddle with a bit more padding than what I have as well. Basically, my saddle is just a shell. So I'd probably, have a bit more cush.
It's interesting though. I had a guy who did Roubaix a couple of years ago, rode it on a SMP Former. So
which is the saddle that I'm talking about.
Which is basically an unpadded saddle, and he found it amazing. He was like, I couldn't believe it. I was absolutely fine, and like it just felt like the best saddle ever. Mainly because it kind of held him in place. And he was able to put out more power and kind of remain in position.
I'd probably use a dynamic rather than a Former though. I'm not a complete sadist. But I think the lower saddle height, the more midfoot cleats, I think would be how I would do it.
Yeah, I would agree. I'd probably go maybe a little bit wider on the handlebars.
I mean, I run 42s anyway, so it ain't getting a lot wider than that, is it?
Yeah, I come back a little bit wider on the bars. I might run my saddle down and back a little bit. Sit back.
Well, if your cleats go back, you're going to need to go forward.
Yeah.
So it depends on where you run your cleats.
Yeah. But just taking some of the weight off my hands,
Yeah.
because I know I'm not that powerful.
Well, there's two ways to do it, right?
So-
Like, you can either move yourself back a little bit to
Yeah.
take the weight off your hands, or you can put more of the weight in your foot
Yeah.
by running a mid-foot cleat position.
So, as always with bike fit, it's just choices. There's
It's
no,
just choices.
no right or wrong, but it's just choices. But yeah, I guess I know I can close my hip relatively far, and it not really affect my riding.
So I can't.
Yeah.
That's the thing.
So I don't mind riding like a slightly more closed hip.
Yeah. Whereas that would make me very unhappy.
Ooh, what about crank length? Should go.
Well, I've got 160s anyway, so I'd stick.
with the 160s.
Yeah.
It's like I run 165s on my road bike, but a 170 crank on my mountain bike. So, would I run a 170 on a Roubaix bike just to get that kind of extra leverage? Don't know. We'll have
Would
to
you
do
just run bigger chain rings though?
just bigger chain rings. Yeah, maybe just do that. 54 on the front.
Big dog.
Big dog.
Yeah. I can't believe this. I used to have a 55 on my time trial bike.
Did you?
And I was like, this is where I was fit, and I couldn't even ride that now. A 52's hard work now.
Well, we all had egos.
I got old and fat. And weak. Yeah, I'll probably stick with my crank length, but maybe gear up a little bit.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, well,
But I
food
would
for thought.
100% be running the fattest tyres that I could get in the frame.
Absolutely, like 47s.
Yeah.
Put those in there. So yeah, interesting stuff.
There's one then. Last thing while we're on that, tubs or tubulars? Or tubs or tubeless, beg your pardon.
I think if I was racing, I'd run tubulars because I just want that tubular stuck on.
Yeah.
I don't want any chance of it flying off. If I was riding super fat tyres, then I'd probably run tubeless, just because it's easier to sort stuff out.
Yeah.
And it'll probably be
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, demands of the sport.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we'll have to go and do it.
Absolutely not. Not a chance, mate.
You just do the middle version. You don't have to do the whole thing.
Even that?
At the end.
No, mate. I've got more respect for myself than to ride that.
All right.
Rubbish.
Flanders then. Flanders.
I'd rather do Strada Bianchi.
Oh, yeah. Paul crashed at that too.
He did. Seems to be doing that a lot this year, hasn't he?
I don't know.
But I think I'd rather do
Strada
that
Bianchi.
than Roubaix. Less chance of trashing my bike.
Yeah. Better coffee too.
Yeah. Although that hill at the end, my goodness.
Anyway, hopefully that's been interesting for you guys. Let us know
Mildly
if
entertaining.
If you did do Paris Roubaix, let us know.
Let us know what your setup was.
Yeah, let us know what the setup was. Did you change anything? Did it work? Will
Would you do it
experiment some more? Yeah. Would you do it again? I mean, if you've done it once, you got to try again, haven't you? Otherwise,
One and done, mate.
yeah.
Like Iron Man.
Or maybe your bike just fell apart, imploded through the effort.
Did you leave your bike in the Arenberg Trench?
Or don't walk it.
Yeah.
Did you go in the Roubaix showers afterwards as well?
Did they let you in? After the Sportive?
I think so. Yeah, they used to. Yeah.
Don't know.
Bit weird though, isn't it?
A little bit.
Yeah, it's a bit like rugby. Takes me back to school rugby.
Oh, yeah. You grew up playing rugby, nothing's weird, is it?
All right, guys. See you on the next one. Take it easy, and yeah, let us know if you had any Roubaix experiences or thoughts. All right. See ya. If you made it to the end of this episode, thanks for listening. If you enjoyed what you heard, do leave us a rating or review, as this really helps other riders find our podcast too, and motivates us to keep making more episodes. Thanks for your support, and catch you on the next one.
Suffering from numb hands, tingling toes, and any other persistent discomforts when you ride? These are all signs that your bike fit could be improved. If you're bike fit curious, get in touch with Wei or Matt by emailing info@foundation.fit or finding them on Instagram @FDN_bikefit. Finally, for all your bike servicing needs, custom dream bike or hand-built wheels, go to www.frequencycycleworks.com or find me on Instagram @frequencycycleworks. Until next time, keep on spinning.